Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With an administration that's claimed that it would be the most transparent in history, we seem to have a repeated pattern of the exact opposite. I believe we need a new level of accountability not only at the EPA, but for this entire administration. And Dr. Schneier, in your opening statement, you describe a culture of secrecy at the EPA. What can be done in the future to ensure more accountability and transparency in terms of what the leadership should be telling folks?
I'm going to offer you something I've been thinking about in that regard. I don't believe it's possible to easily motivate or to alter the culture at the top of an agency, but I do think there are some things that could be put in place that would have an effect on the career employees who can actually change the culture on their own. It's very difficult to reprimand a person for failing to follow the Freedom of Information Act. They're never credited for doing a good job. It's just part of that 10% other duties is assigned. But I believe that if there were a sanction that went to the pocketbook of the employee,
yes,
that said, you don't do that job and you suffer a $5,000 fine out of your own pocket, then the employee would go up his management chain and say, I'm not doing that for you, sir. Ma'am, I'm giving these emails away because they're not going to put themselves at risk. And so that's something that this body would have to look at, and what kind of sanctions would be available. But presently, there really are none.
But if I understood you to say the senior leadership at the agency, or any agency for that matter, they're the ones that need to set the standard, and they lead to a culture of secrecy or not. Don't you agree?
Well, Congressman, policy is personnel. There's no way around it.
Right.
It's the people that make the difference. All I'm suggesting to you is that in this town, over my last 40 years, that's not an approach that I see as very helpful. People do what they do. But I do think there are ways to get to it that would have a greater effect by making the public servants, the people who come into government, particularly because they want to serve and who are honest and good people. Scott Fulton's name was mentioned earlier today. Scott Fulton's one of the most honorable men I know. He's a great guy. What happened and how he was involved in the investigation, I have no idea. But I know this: Scott Fulton's not the kind of guy who would lie, cheat, or steal.
Well, and I've heard the opposing side, the other side today, talk about thousands and thousands, the vast volume of emails or texts. Does that really matter, whether it's a vast volume or whether it's just a few?
Let me just share very briefly.
It's still a record. It's a record.
That's right. And in a case I brought against EPA, when we settled the matter, EPA came to me and said, as part of the settlement, we're going to require Region 10 to every employee in Region 10 to be retrained on FOIA, because clearly they did not respond adequately in this case. That wasn't our request, and I don't really think it came from EPA. I think it came from the AUSA, who was trying to negotiate a deal. But the reality is it's up to the individuals to do the job, and you've got to give them the tools. And I credit the agency, and in particular Larry Gottesman, for doing a wonderful job in getting the tools available. It is, however, the culture.
All right, following that up then, during your time at the EPA, how often was agency staff reminded that what they were working on could be construed as federal records and that would need to be preserved? Did you hear this? Did you experience it?
Well, we had, with some regularity, there was an online training that folks had to do, and they do regular time. Now, at the end of my career, I was a lawyer, and we had to do more training than most, so I don't know how it reached out to everyone. But every employee that comes into the agency is required to get FOIA training. What we found, though, in our recommendations briefly was that no one remembers it. So when we built the system to try to help people do it, we helped reteach them what their responsibilities were. But that doesn't reach to text messages. It doesn't reach to clearing out your own email box for the most part.
And it needs to be so.
I agree, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.